How worried are you about protectionism? Let's take the U.S. Malaysia exports lots of goods to the U.S. Are you concerned at protectionism, or do you think it won't be so bad?
The risk is there, and I think clearly most governments, especially given the size and the depth of the various bailout packages and the stimulus packages, that naturally I think the taxpayers will demand accountability on the domestic side. But I'd like to think beyond that. I think there is enough interdependency in the global system that eventually this will come through. Both, even in the absence of a Doha round being implemented, I think there's enough, both bilateral and I think the more real at the company level, that supply chains are organized across countries in any case. And having said that, I think the world needs a conscious effort not to retreat into protectionism, where there are forces pulling at national levels, understandably, because of the national accountability that comes with big stimulus and bailout packages. But I believe that there'll be enough or hopefully enough to show that over.
One development that has emerged from the crisis is almost the acceleration or the recognition that the G20, rather than the G7 or G8, has a greater role to play.
Certainly G20 is a welcome move away from just G7. The real question is whether G20 is enough. I think that remains to be seen. And clearly, I think it will be challenging, because G20, while this is a large part of the world, what is still not at the table is other parts of the world, including the 3 billion who are living under $2 US a day. Now is the world ready to, first of all, look beyond domestic stimulus programs and protectionism, and then to work within the larger economic powers, but over and above that, to actually the development agenda for some of the third world countries, which eventually actually could be part of the solution in coming out with a virtuous circle that can help to develop some of this world that can eventually become markets for the more developed world.
Meanwhile, in the current year and in the short term, the next year or two, it would appear that most, if not all, of the growth in global GDP terms will come from, really, with the exception of Brazil, the Middle East and Asia, or parts of the Middle East and Asia.
The last few hundred years of China, India in particular, having a smaller share of global GDP than is actually an exception to the long swathe of history, really. So we're really this so-called rebirthing of China and India is actually more a return to the norm rather than, so in other words, it's been an exception in the last few years. What is driving that? And obviously these are continental economies with a large population base, a mercantile and entrepreneurial society that's been kept under all kinds of barriers and obstacles for many years, and now this is being unleashed. The Middle East, as a contiguous group within that, also has the advantage of the substantial reserves. So I think coupled with the phenomenon of increased technology and travel and globalization, I think this will be put together. We see that this trend, while affected by the crisis, it will continue to flow. I think the need to diversify has actually been amplified by the current financial crisis, diversify away from some of the more traditional centers of investment that the Middle East funds, for example, have been making in the past. Over the last 30, 40 years, I think there's, if anything, the global crisis, the problems in the banking system in the West, the rise of Islamic finance, for example, has meant that this trend of moving more eastwards is a strong secular trend that I think will continue.